Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Tech Guys Who Invest. On this episode, we have Edwin. He is a former Green Beret, investor, fund manager, and a podcast host. The man does it all. Welcome, Edwin.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, guys. It's good to be here, and I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Awesome. So are we. So let's start it off with a question that may be on a lot of people's minds. How did you make the transition from Green Beret to a private fund manager?
Well, it did not happen overnight, that is for sure.
You didn't take it off and say, I'm a fund manager.
So I guess it's a long story. I'm not going to get into the details. I wanted to invest in real estate like many of your listeners. Many of the people that are listening to this and many other podcasts are wanting to know, how can I get invested in real estate? And I had the absolute privilege of meeting a gentleman at a real estate investor meeting up in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And he stood at the back of the room, and at the end of every meeting, he would say, any of you real estate investors that need capital for your fix and flips, come talk to me. I'm a private lender. And of course, he always had a line of guys coming and talking to him. Hey, I need money to borrow. I need money to borrow. And I thought, well, what better person to get to know than the guy with the money, right? He who has the goal makes the rules. So I wanted to get to know him and went back there. I don't know, it was maybe early 2010. Myself, I have to say I was a little arrogant. I was like, I'm in the Army. I've been in the Army for, at that point, like 8 years. I've been in the Army for 8 years. I'm a training Green Beret, blase, blase, blase. I'm going to do real estate investing on the side. And after he heard my story and talked to me for a little bit, I imagine he patted me on the head and said, well, Mr. Epperson, I appreciate your service. Thank you. I think it's honorable. I think what you're doing is great, but I wouldn't loan you money if you're the last person on earth. Now, he didn't say that, but that's what I heard. So I was like, what? So in my mind, I got really defensive. And he went on to explain to me the 3 keys that it takes for anybody to be successful in any industry, whether you're invested in real estate, whether you run one, you need to have these 3 keys to be successful. And when he explained them to me, I thought, oh, well, that actually makes a lot of sense because I don't have those. And those 3 keys were, you need to have the experience. Now, you can't have the experience unless you have the knowledge.
Right.
You can't really gain the knowledge to do that craft or whatever it is that you're wanting to do without the time. And you can't gain that time unless you have the discipline to carve out that time out of your current day. And with me, where I was at in my military career, I simply did not have the ability to carve out time. My every waking minute was dedicated to becoming a Green Beret. I was only able to go to these meetings every now and then. It was, once a month, and only if I had the free time. So clearly what he was telling me resonated, but it started me on a path. And so for the next few months, we would talk, and then I don't know, it was maybe 3 or 4 months, maybe the late spring, early summer of 2010, he asked me a question that was very pivotal. It radically changed the way that I looked at real estate investing. And he asked me, have you ever considered becoming the bank? And that started me down a path to where I am now. So this path to become a fund manager was not overnight. It has been many, many, many years in the making. And I would say for the first 3 years, and some of your listeners I know are probably, they've read a book, they went to a course, they've done something to where it has piqued their curiosity into real estate. And so now they are trying to expand knowledge and understanding. And for those listeners out there, just don't feel pressured by the rest of all these gurus and everybody. If you're plugged into Facebook groups or LinkedIn communities and you're hearing all these people doing all these wonderful, fantastic things, don't get overwhelmed with the fact that maybe you have not made progress in that. I spent 3 years, I didn't do one deal during those 3 years. All I did was study how to become the bank, how to look at real estate investing through the lens of a lender, not a borrower. And so it was a long process. I did not actually do my first deal until 3.5 years later. So,
yeah, Edwin, I think that's really good for our listeners to hear. I hear a lot of people that are they have all this success and supposed rapid success, and
Yep.
it's sensational. And I know for me, I just felt like I was always moving so slow compared to all these things I was seeing on social media and hearing at shows. And so it's fantastic to hear you say that and give people who are curious but may feel like maybe I'm doing something wrong because I'm not seeing this as fast as everyone else seems to, a
Yep.
peace of mind.
Yeah.
So,
And to add on to that, when you were experiencing that, you said it took you 3.5 years. What was the mindset that you had that prevented you from saying, you know what? This person's making money with flipping. Let me go do that. Or this person, I hear about this Airbnb that's happening. Let me go do that. How did you avoid that?
We call that chasing the shiny object, don't we?
yeah,
Yes, we do.
It is. And in the real estate world, it's very hard to stay. I have to be honest, I was not 100% committed to this. There were the shiny objects that popped up. Oh, wow, there's this opportunity to learn how to do, oh, goodness. Where lease
Tax
options.
liens,
Oh, I'm going to
yeah.
do lease options. Oh, wow, that sounds fantastic. No money out of my pocket. Oh, there's wholesaling. Let me go take this class on wholesaling. For all the listeners who have invested a lot of their time and in their minds right now, it's probably their capital. So they're looking at the money that they've spent on this education, and they've invested thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars in their education. The chasing the shiny object syndrome it's probably the absolute number one killer of actually moving forward, taking that first step in real estate investing. I would encourage any of your listeners, and this is really what I had to do. I kept coming back to this because everyone will know when there's something that just it speaks to you. It's an intangible, but it speaks to the very heart of who you as an individual are. You're going to know that is my way into real estate investing. And it doesn't matter if it's commercial or multifamily or single family. It doesn't matter if it's wholesaling or lease options or fix and flips. It does not matter the method or the asset class. What matters is that you can connect intellectually and emotionally to that investing technique. And when that happens, that's the investing technique that you should just lock in. I mean, you should laser in. And that's one of the things that allowed me to be successful in becoming a Green Beret is that, in the military, there are a lot of different courses, a lot of different schools, a lot of different paths. And becoming a Green Beret is very hard. It's not easy. And there are a lot of times where I would literally be, I would have a 110-pound bag on my back. My back would be hurting. My legs would be hurting. My feet would be full of blisters. And I was just walking what seemed like an endless mile after mile after mile. And it's like, why am I putting myself through this? This is pointless. It's the same way with real estate investing. As your investors, as the people that are listening are trying to figure out, where is my niche? Where is it that I want to focus in on? When they find it and it speaks to their heart, they need to lock in on that. And that's what they just need to pour their time, devotion, and energy into figuring out and understanding that investment technique. That's really what helped me. I won't say stay focused because I wasn't focused the entire time, but time and time and again, when I would start to get distracted, I would start looking at the potential or whatever it was. And my heart and my mind just kept going back to this lending. And in my mind, guys, I didn't come from money. So for anybody that's listening, like, I'm not a trust fund baby. I didn't come from money at all. My mom and my dad's a blue collared worker. He worked his entire life. My mom's a women's minister at a church in Louisville, Kentucky. So we didn't grow up with the Rolls Royce and having a trust fund and everything. Matter of fact, I went to college. I went to a community college. English 101 for one semester, was the only college education that I have. That's it. So this thought process that I think a lot of people get pushed on, you have to have this education, you have to have this money, you have to have this success, it has to be in your family lineage. It's completely hogwash. It does not apply. What matters is the amount of time and dedication that any of your listeners are going to pour into their personal real estate investing and gain the time, the knowledge. And when you get those two, you'll be able to gain that experience, which is going to be the three pillars that you're going to be able to build your family's generational wealth on, are those three pillars.
Yeah, I like that. And we started to definitely touch on blockers and things that would prevent people from getting into it, those mindset hurdles. And
Absolutely.
one of the biggest that I hear, and people don't even realize it's one for them, is what you said about coming from a middle class background, not coming from a wealth position, and getting into this. And I'm the same way. So is Kevin, right? We both are come from middle class, non-wealthy families, right? And are
Yeah.
breaking into this. And that's one of the biggest barriers I hear, though, is but I don't have money, or I'll invest when I have money. What would you say to someone who's kind of stuck there and they have that mindset of, well, it's just as soon as I have money saved, I'll invest?
Oh man, if I can offer some encouragement, if I can offer some oomph behind that ability to get over that, we call them obstacles, right?
Yep.
This mental obstacle, because that's all it is. There is nothing physically stopping you from doing anything in this world. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter your financial status. It does not matter your educational history, your educational status.
That's
None of that matters. What matters, especially in being in America, living in this nation that we live in, with the opportunities that are available, anybody, it doesn't matter. You could have literally grown up on food stamps and been in the absolute poorest section of your town or city, and the opportunities are there for you the same as they are for somebody who's grown up with a trust fund, and financially they never have a care in the rest of their life for all of eternity, right?
Yeah, it's so true.
But the opportunities are available to one and the same. And the biggest hurdle that I can encourage anyone, and I have to say that this is a hurdle that it took me a long time to realize, interestingly enough, coming from my background, it is the team set mentality. So in special forces, everything is team. Matter of fact, before you even get into the actual earning of your Green Beret, you have to go through what's called a assessment and selection phase. This assessment and selection is to, and you don't know what the rules and the guidelines are, but these Green Berets are actually watching your every movement from the time that you wake up until the time that you wake up, even while you're sleeping. They are watching everybody and evaluating and determining, is this somebody that in the next 2 years I would want to serve with in combat? That's how their mentality is. And so when you're in this special forces assessment and selection for 3 weeks, sometimes it varies. Sometimes it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's 4 weeks. They keep changing it up so that nobody really knows. But it is a gut check. It is one of the most intensive trainings I've ever been through. And at the end of the day, it's all about teamwork. Can you work with other people? And so for those real estate investors that are struggling with these mental hurdles of, I don't have the money, I don't come from money, I don't have the education, or whatever the case may be, finding a team that you can connect with, plug in with, is the absolute litmus test of whether you're going to be successful or not. And one of the biggest ways to plug into a team is plugging into your local real estate investors association or real estate investors club. And if you go to your local real estate investors club and everybody at the club you just don't connect with them on an emotional or a psychological or any type of level, that's why you have LinkedIn groups and you have Facebook groups. You can plug into these groups and start. And let me just put a plug here. I don't have any financial interest in this. I don't have an ownership, but Bigger Pockets is an incredible community.
Yes.
If your listening audience is not plugged into Bigger Pockets, I highly recommend, like, that should be the number one go-to. The very first thing you do as a real estate investor is create a Bigger Pockets profile and get on there and just start skimming all the chats, all the topics, everything that's being going on there. Because in Bigger Pockets, you have people that really do want to be successful in real estate, and they are more than willing to offer their experience. They're more than willing to offer their advice on things that worked and did not work for them in the real estate investing. And in Facebook and LinkedIn and these different communities, you're going to plug into some of those groups, and you're going to get an overwhelming sense that everybody's just trying to sell me something. They're trying to push something on me. And so in my opinion, Bigger Pockets is an incredible platform to start for real estate investors.
Absolutely. And one thing that I've recognized, because that helped me too, is a lot of people are willing to help you if you're willing to do the work. If you just said, hey, give me this, they tell you to pound send. But if you're saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm stuck, they will provide a different perspective or potentially a solution to help you move past that obstacle.
And a great point, Kevin. I would have to say that in my personal experience, pride and arrogance, those are things that are absolutely killers when it comes to trying to get started in something new. And for those listeners out there that, okay, yeah, I get it. I need to find a team. And then you're going to go out there and you're going to plug in, and it's like, well, I need a team, but it's my way or the highway. And you're brand new. You don't have the listen, guys, I've managed over 15 million assets under management, which in the fund management space, that's peanuts. That's not even peanuts. It doesn't even register on the scale, right? 15 million. You have fund managers that are managing. I personally know a fund manager that manages $1.9 billion as of last year. Me standing next to him as far as accomplishments, he's like, who are you? But he doesn't. So he doesn't do that, right? And the reason he does not do that is because my approach is not like, well, I'm this guy, in my past, I've done this, and I'm successful in all these areas. No, I approach him with like, I'm not going to say his name, but excuse me, I'm completely stuck in this, and it's I literally, every time I've talked to him about a problem or a scenario that we faced, he's like, oh yeah, well, look at this, da, 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 da. And it's like, oh, thank you. Wow, that's amazing. I appreciate that. So for all your listeners that are, you have to humble yourself. You have to realize that you don't have the experience. You don't have all of the knowledge. And even when you have 40 years in the game, there's going to be something new to learn every single day. So, find a team, find a tribe that you can just plug into, sink your teeth into, you can meet with on a weekly or at a minimum a monthly basis. If you're trying to do this by yourself, it's going to be a very long and hard, arduous road uphill. And it has shattered many a dreams, people trying to take this on by themselves. So find a tribe, plug in, surround yourself with a team, and believe me, you're going to go so much further with a team than by yourself.
Yeah, it is so true. I mean, so much of what you said there resonated with me, and agree. As soon as I found a team is when I really started to feel like I was moving forward. So,
absolutely.
So that's awesome. Tell us about, I can just imagine someone with your background and seeing where you've been and where you're going, that you grow continuously. And I'd love to hear how you kind of invest in yourself from a personal growth standpoint.
So at least once a week, I get a facial and no, I'm joking.
So does Kevin. That's amazing.
I mean, look at this. Look at his face.
Look at this. It's a baby face. No, one of the ways that I continually invest in myself. So everybody's heard of, I'm sure many of your listeners have heard of, you've got your physical, you've got your health, you've got your mental, learning new things, new techniques, you've got your career, you've got your spiritual, so these categories that we sort of compartmentalize our lives in. One of the categories that, and this has been, I can't speak for anyone else, but for me has been absolutely instrumental in ushering in success, has been my spiritual. So one of the things that I'm adamant about is spending time in prayer every day, reading the Bible, and really spending time with my God. And some people call it meditation and other things. I call it what it is. I'm not ashamed of it. So my spiritual walk is the foundation for success in everything else. My marriage, my relationship with my boys, my relationship in my business relationships, my company as a whole, and everything that we're doing. So if it was not for that, everything else would fall apart. And there's people out there that can make the other aspects of their life, they can force it to work. But I'll tell you what, if that spiritual piece is missing, it's so much more energy is poured into the other aspects, that if you have that piece there, that foundation, it makes the other aspects really easy to increase on. Going into the other aspects, peer groups are huge. When I first started out on this, going back to the team mentality, every dollar was so important, right?
Right.
Every dollar represented an opportunity or a lesson learned. Right? So where do I want to invest that dollar? And having peer groups, whether it's mentorship one-on-one, or whether it's a group of other men and women, or only women, regardless, having a peer group that you can pour into and that you can have them pour into you is absolutely critical. Again, it goes back to that team mentality. And I have to say this. So there's a lot of gurus out there and self-help gurus that are very much like, hey, you need to plug in. And so I actually was taught this, right? When I first started getting started into the lending space, they're like, well, you need to plug into where money exists, where other people that have money operate, right? So where do people with money hang out? That's where you need to plug in. Let me tell you this, guys, for you all and your listening audience, people that have money, they understand when somebody is there genuinely because they're there to improve themselves, such as Kiwanis or the Rotary or any of these other organizations. What's it called? The Chambers of Commerce, things like that, right? So when you're in those environments, people have a very good sixth sense, and they can pick out pretty quickly, this guy's just here to try to get my money, right? And then they can also sense when someone is there genuinely trying to make connections, improve themselves, and do good for whatever the community is that they're in. And so as your listening audience, as you all are going out there and you're considering, where do I need to plug in to meet my ideal client? Make sure it's genuine.
Sure.
For instance, I hate golf. I despise golf. If golf would just be erased tomorrow, I would be a very happy man. It would not affect me at all. And everybody tells me, oh, well, you need to go to the golf course. That's where the deals are made. Bull crap. You know where I take my investors? We go to the gun range.
Nice.
Put a couple of lead bullets down range, have some fun. And then afterwards, just like, man, I just got to release. You don't know how many investors I've taken to a gun range. And they're like, this is the craziest thing. I've never been to a gun range. Well, shoot, this is going to be awesome, man. Let me show you what to do. So, plug into a tribe, plug into something that you enjoy. If you enjoy golf, don't go skydiving. Don't go to a gun range. You don't enjoy that. You're putting on a facade. If you really enjoy businesses, don't get plugged into an organization that's not about businesses and it's about something else. All I'm saying is be genuine in the areas and the tribe, if you will, that you plug into and that you connect with, because people they will understand sincerity, and they understand a fake face or a mask, right? They're going to see right through that.
Absolutely.
So that would be one of the things as far as self-improvement. Plug into that. Read tons of books. If you're not reading, if you're not listening to a podcast, and if you're not watching even LinkedIn videos such as this, you are missing out. You're doing yourself a disservice. Matter of fact, every day for lunch, I watch YouTube videos. I watch YouTube videos from other financial investors that have their own YouTube channels. And I also watch YouTube videos on when defending the faith. So people that defend the faith for Christian faith, I watch apologetics. So I've got my favorite apologetics. So every day for lunch, I'm watching a video or something, or listening to a podcast on one of those things. And again, improving yourself does not have to be only financial or in the real estate world. And unfortunately, that's what I'm sure a lot of your listening audience, I need to pour into my life, everything about real estate, but you need a balance.
Agreed.
Like if you're married, You should have the same desire, honestly, if not more, how to be a better husband or a better wife. You should have this same desire. Matter of fact, you should have it more, how to be a better father, how to be a better mother. Like, we need to be pouring into ourselves across the spectrum of how to become a better human being, not just focused on real estate investing or whatever it is that they're doing. So,
that balance piece
that's my,
is something
that's
we
my
don't
take.
hear often enough. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I mean, I love that the conversation is going everywhere, but it's also focused on being better in yourself, and that is huge, because if you start going down this path without that anchor of who you are, it's going to get rough really fast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ask me how I know.
Now, to transition from the lender perspective, when you are lending, what criteria do you look for when you decide, this person is worth taking on that risk? What is something that you look for?
Excellent question. So I know, I'm constantly in an uphill battle or uphill struggle. So I typically, I don't really carry on the conversation with borrowers per se. I'm much more on the capital raising side. So I have brokers, or we have loan originators that we simply refer business out to. That individual handles the collecting of file and information. And at the end of the day, I'm the one with the rubber stamp that says, yes, we're going to do this loan, or no, we're not. And it's going to be based on the information that's collected. However, I have set the guidelines by which my loan originators operate by. So the information that they're collecting is information that I need to see to make a decision whether we're going to do the loan. I'm actually not big. Matter of fact, I don't care about your credit score. And what you're going to find, and this is still a sticking point for me in the industry. Many of your listeners right now, they are real estate investors, and they're probably out there trying to find a property that they can buy, reposition, or renovate, depending on what type of property is. And then they're either going to sell it for profit, or they're going to refinance into a long-term loan. So many of them are looking for private lenders or hard money lenders, and that's a whole nother conversation. What is the difference between a private lender and a hard money lender? Then why do some hard money lenders call themselves private lenders? That's a whole different conversation. But they're out there trying to find somebody that will loan them money. And you have a lot of companies that say, oh, well, credit doesn't matter, credit doesn't matter. But then at the end of the day, if they don't have a certain credit score, the lender is saying, oh, well, I'm sorry, we can't do the loan for you. Well, I thought you said my credit score didn't matter, right? So just know that when your listeners are looking or seeking for a loan, if a lender is telling them, oh, credit score doesn't matter, simply ask them this: is there a minimum? If there is a minimum credit score, guess what? Credit score matters. So, it doesn't matter if someone in your listening audience has an 800 credit score. When they're talking to a lender, just say, well, what if I have a 500 credit score? Is that going to prevent me from getting a loan from you? And if the lender says, well, yeah, actually that would prevent you from getting a loan, then guess what? That lender is credit driven.
Right.
It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter what they put out. If that lender says your credit score will determine whether you get a loan or not, they are credit driven. We are not. And I have gone at great lengths to lay this out for my loan originators and to make sure that my company understands exactly what we're looking at when we're looking at a loan. We look at experience. Now, how do you determine experience? Because I've talked to many people and they're like, oh, well, I've done 100 properties over the past couple of years. Okay, well, show me proof. And then you hear crickets. So a proof is the HUD-1 or the closing statement or closing disclosure when they purchased the property and when they sold the property. If you are in the business of real estate investing, you should be keeping your documents of every transaction. You should be taking photos of before, during, and after your renovations. You should be the most detailed when it comes to documenting your processes. Why? Because somebody like me who does not take into consideration your credit score, I don't care. I've done loans with somebody with sub 500 credit score. It does not matter to me. I've also denied someone a loan who had a 800 plus credit score. Why? Because I fall back to those 3 lessons that I learned from the very first private lender that I ever spoke to. I look at your time, your experience, and your knowledge. And if you're not plugged into a real estate investment club, so this is the situation with the 800, right? So this gentleman approached me, said, hey, I've got money. I've got an 800 credit score. Very arrogant. Number one, huge turnoff. I don't want to work with arrogant people. If you're arrogant and you think you know everything, then go out there and find somebody that's going to work with you, because I'm not. So number one, he was arrogant. Number two, he had this, I have an 800 credit score. You should lay down before me and offer me whatever I want. Sort of like there's a commercial. I forget the bank, but this lady walks in. She puts her feet up on the desk. Is like, I've got an 800 credit score. And the banker's like, oh, well, what do you want? Right. So I'm not like that. Big whoop-de-doo. You've done a great job with your credit. Great job. I'm not a credit underwriter. I'm looking at the asset, and I'm looking at your experience. He didn't have any experience. This was his very first loan. He didn't have a general contractor. He literally told me, I can handle that. We're not doing anything. I can handle that. I can handle that. Well, what's your experience? So I've never done a fix and flip, but it doesn't matter. It's easy. One thing after another. And I said, you know what? And he sent me his credit score. I saw his credit score. He had an 800 plus on all three credit bureaus. Like from a credit driven perspective, this guy was gold. But you know what? He represented a huge risk and honestly, a huge headache. I didn't want to have to deal with his attitude for the next 6 to 7 months. That would have been a pain in my neck. I probably would have gone over wherever he was at and literally beat his face in. I could not handle somebody like that. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but that's my thoughts. So we are not a credit-driven underwriting. We are experienced, but somebody has to have the experience. If they don't have the experience, that's fine. We can work with someone, but just know that your rates are going to be higher because you represent a greater risk to us in not finishing on time or on budget. Those are two huge KPIs that we look at when it comes to lending.
Makes sense. And Edwin, for those who are listening and may not know, maybe they're a little bit new to the game, and this might
maybe they're scared now. They're like, this Green Beret is going to find me and beat my face.
My lender is an ex-Green Beret who will assault me if I. No. Yeah, I was wondering if you could explain a little bit about the business model in terms of, who are the type of customers who come to you, and what type of products do you lend them? What does that look like, even at a high level? May help some folks understand the difference between you and someone like a mortgage bank or something like that.
Okay. So we are at a high level. So let's see if I can condense this to a few sentences. So I used to be very broad I wanted to do commercial. I wanted to do multifamily. I wanted to do single family. So you've got, in the industry, you have two ways that loans are looked at. You have the asset, whatever is being collateralized. That's typically the property type, if you will. And then you've got the loan type. Now, in the lending space, there are, as many stars in the sky, there are as many programs as far as loans go, right? So we've become very focused on only doing investor loans on investment properties. What does that look like? Number one, there has to be an entity. If the entity is not on the purchase and sell agreement and it's an individual, it doesn't matter anything. All that person has to do is hire a savvy real estate attorney. If they're going into default, they hire a savvy real estate attorney and say, well, this was technically a consumer loan. There you go. And the federal government and the state government, and here in Florida, that's where we are located, but in most states will seriously take on, well, this lender, if it was a business loan, should have been lending to a business, an entity. Why did they make a business loan to an individual? Okay. So we don't do loans to individuals. If you're in the business of real estate investing, then you should have an entity that you are conducting your business through. Plain and simple. So that's number one hurdle. You have to have an entity that is actually listed on the purchase and sell agreement. If you got the purchase sell agreement on your personal name and then you realize, oh, I should have had an entity, and you create an entity, that's fine, but you have to have an addendum that shows that this contract has been assigned or moved over to the entity. That's all we need, but it has to be an entity. As far as the asset, again, we had a very broad scope, and we really narrowed it down to only single-family residences right now. That's 1 to 4 units. It can be a duplex, triplex, or quadplex, but it has to fit within the federal the federal guidelines, if you will, of what qualifies as a single family residence, and that's 1 to 4 units. 5 units plus is technically considered family or commercial family or multifamily. And so that's a space that I'm not in right now. We also don't touch commercial assets. Now, the loan types that we do are considered commercial loans because it's my entity loaning money to your entity. Therefore, it is considered a commercial loan. But the asset, the underlying collateral, is a single family residences.
All right, that
Interesting.
helps. Yeah.
And just out of curiosity, what would be the reasoning behind staying on the residential asset class versus commercial?
Excellent question, Kevin. So the reason is the velocity of capital. So as a fund manager, my goal is to turn my investors' capital as quickly as possible, as often as possible. That's how I generate a return for my investors that keep them very, very happy, and they continue to want to invest with me more. Their capital, right? Their money.
Right.
So how I do that is by keeping that time frame very short. Single family, it's very quick to not only purchase the asset, but when you're looking to sell the asset, because it's single family, there are your buyer pool for your asset once it's completed and renovated or rented out and you're selling it as a turnkey. That buyer pool is huge. When you get into the commercial space and you're talking hundreds and hundreds, if not millions of dollars, the buyer pool shrinks really quick.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
the reason that we've done that is it serves twofold. Number one, I can turn the capital quickly, right? So we loan the money out, 6 months later, we get our money back. We make another loan. That's fantastic. As well as it mitigates the risk with the market shift. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners have been paying attention to the market. We are in year, I think it's 12 of a typically 7-year cycle for real estate. So we're in year 12 of typically a 7-year cyclical cycle for real estate. So after 7 years, technically after 2011, 7 more years, actually, I guess that would be 2018. So we're a few years beyond. Some people will go back to 2008. Hey, that's when the cycle started. But I say the bottom of the cycle was 2011. So we've been on an upward tick of going on 8 years. We are well past beyond the next correction, right? So, we look at that as a single family residence. We make a loan on a house. We can get out of that property very quickly. When you get into the commercial and the multifamily space, you're not going to get out of that asset quickly. And once people start to realize that that property, the market's starting to turn or correct, they're not buying multi-million-dollar assets. They're holding on to their capital, right? Well, who is buying assets? Well, right. You, me, people that are looking for a new place to live in. So single-family residences is really where our core business model is at.
All right, thanks. And you mentioned correction, and that's something that Kevin and I talk about a lot. And we like to ask our guests what they're doing to prepare for that, or how they're looking at that, because it's just a matter of time before something happens there. And I think our listeners would be curious to hear what you're doing to kind of prepare for that.
So what we're doing is because we have the ability to have a fund and I'm managing that fund, we are being very intentional with the assets that we have in the fund. So within the fund, let's say we have a pool of 100%. Well, right. Within that fund, only 40% of our fund is being dedicated to lending. Another 40% right now is being dedicated to fix and flips. So the fund is actually purchasing properties and renovating them and then listing them for sale. So that's 80% total now. Another 20% is for rentals. So typically what we're looking at is on the acquisition side, if the fund is buying the asset, 60% of our capital is dedicated to buying assets right now. When we buy an asset, we look at the exit strategy. Does it make sense to sell this, or does it make sense to hold it for a rental? If it makes sense to hold it for a rental, it's got to fall within that 20%. Once we've used 20% of our fund capital for that rental, then everything else is going to the other two assets, or the other two divisions, what we call our 3-division approach. The other 2 divisions, lending and fix and flip, are getting the rest of the capital. And so we have a very And again, that's part of my job as a fund manager. My job is to manage the capital as it's coming in and the deployment of that capital, where we are putting that capital to work. So we are being very diversified, not only in our lending, but also in our acquisitions, the properties that we are acquiring to hold on portfolio and for sale.
Interesting. We like that. So there's a diversification there, and there's a reallocation based off of how things are happening.
Yes, absolutely. And we can quickly shift with the market. So the way we've structured it, the reason we only have 20% of the fund towards hold is because those hold properties, that for us is a long game. That's a long-term play. So we're really cherry picking those assets that we're holding. Everything else is very quick, very rapid. Now, when the market shifts, what's going to happen is a very large portion of our portfolio is going to start moving into the long-term hold, right? So we're going to hold a lot of our assets through the next correction. And, corrections can last anywhere from literally a few months to, like we saw in 2008 to 2011, 5 years, or not 5 years, 4 years, where 2011, 2012. But we saw this correction that lasted a very long time. And then 2012, we started to see an uptick. And since 2012, it's been going up, right?
Right.
So it's really a matter of, as we see the trends in the market start to shift, then we can adjust quickly, because we're not locked into a long-term play. We're not locked into a 3, 5, 7-year strategy with the commercial or multifamily. It's very quick. We can quickly make our adjustments as necessary.
That's fantastic. I like that. You're able to pivot quickly.
Yes. And that was very key, right?
Absolutely. Now, from your perspective, you've seen investors succeed and you've seen investors fail. Yeah. What would be the most common mistakes that investors seem to be repeating in your eyes?
Oh, the almighty dollar. It happened to me. I cannot sit here and say that I've never lost investors' capital. I've lost investors' capital. And for anybody who is wanting to play in the big boy space, so I had 5 mentors. So the gentleman that I met at the back of the room, he introduced me to 5 people. These investors, 2 gentlemen out of California, a gentleman up in Colorado, and a husband and wife team down in Texas. And they became my mentors over the next 3 years, where all I did was consume information, regurgitate it to them on video calls like this. I flew out to California, flew out to Texas, met them in person. So they were instrumental in helping me. That's why I'm so big on a team. If your listening audience is not seeking, like their life depended on it, if they are not seeking a team or a tribe to plug into, you're missing the boat. You're completely missing the boat. You will never get to where you want to get and where you can get to if you don't have a team behind you. So that's the last time that I'm going to visit that subject. So everybody knows I'm big on teams. So find yourself a team. I had actually lost investors' capital. It was the 6th deal that I ever did. The very first deal, when I finally pulled the trigger, if you will, on real estate investing, I did my very first loan on the side of a mountain in Afghanistan. That was my very first time that I originated my very first loan. And that's when I realized I had the light bulb go off in my head. Oh my gosh, I am not geographically restricted, right? I can literally do lending anywhere as long as I have a team in place in those geographical locations. I can lend in Athens, Greece. I can lend in Moscow, Russia. I can lend in London. I can lend in Mali. I can lend anywhere. Like, I literally am unrestricted because I did my very first loan in Afghanistan. So what can you say about that? So, but my 6th loan was in April of 2016. And I lost $340,000 of my investors' capital. We then pursued litigation. And this is a very long story. I'm not going to go into it now. If any of your listeners want to email me, by all means, email me. I'll be more than happy to tell them the story. We lost $340,000 of my investors' capital, and we spent about another $150,000 pursuing in litigation, and we didn't get a penny back. A lot of lessons learned in that. That was early on in my career. But it hurt. It hurt a lot. I have to say, so I had 7 investors in that deal. Of those 7 investors, 5 have continued to invest with me throughout the year. So If I can, I'd like to visit when something goes wrong. What do you do? Because it's not a matter of if. Like, I know many of your listening audience, and maybe even you, and even myself, I still struggle with, well, I've arrived. Like, I'm never going to be scammed. I'm never going to be fooled. Like, I'm always going to make the right decisions. But that's not the case. Inevitably, something will go wrong, and you will lose your money or your investors' money. What do you do when that happens? So I've got 3 core values, and we were talking about some of the people that we read books on. One of my favorite books is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. They're 2 Navy SEALs. You know, they're frogmen. We'll give it to them. It's, they weren't good enough to be Green Berets, so they. But great book, incredible book about leadership and really that ownership mentality that pervades the special operations community. One of those, so the extreme ownership and then communication. I'm huge on communication. My specialty, besides being a door kicker and a trigger puller, was communications. My job on my Green Beret team, or my ODA, Operational Detachment Alpha, was to maintain communications no matter what. And you know, you've got a lot of specialties on a special forces team. You've got your Bravos, which are weapons specialists. They know everything about every type of weapon under the sun. You've got your Charlies, which are your demolitions experts. You've got your Deltas, which are your medical. You've got your Echoes, which are what I was, your communications, and you've got your Foxes, which are your intelligence guys. So this sort of makes up, and then you've got your Alphas and your Zulus, which are your team leader and team sergeant. So this makes up a Green Beret team. And, you know, if you're in the middle of an ambush, you're in the middle of an operation and all hell breaks loose, you're literally in a 3-day gunfight. You're fighting for your life. You're calling in resupply. You're calling in food. You're calling in water. You're calling in ammo and you're calling in airstrikes to get the bad guys off your tail. When it all comes down, if you noticed, every single one of those entailed calling in.
Right.
If you don't have communication, your entire mission is you're dead. You're absolutely dead. And the same goes in your real estate investing. When you're real estate investing and you do not maintain communication, if you're in the lending side, if you don't maintain communication with your borrower, or if you're a real estate investor and you've got private individuals that have invested their personal capital into your deal, and you are not maintaining communication with all parties involved, your boat has left the dock and you are stranded. You will be in a world of hurt. And so when I lost my investors' capital and I realized that I had, like, when it clicked, I literally had to do a video call like this, and I had to get all of them on the call and let them know I made a mistake. I was foolish with your capital. I was foolish with this investment. And I literally laid out, these are all the areas that I failed you in this investment, as well as this is my A, B, and C. These are the ways that we can move forward. So not only did I present, hey, I messed up, I'm sorry, I didn't stop there. That's not gonna, if you're dealing with investors, you can't simply say, hey, I'm sorry, I lost your money, tough luck, we'll talk to you later, right?
Yeah.
They expect you, as somebody that they have trusted with their investment, you had better have an action plan. We call it courses of action, or COA. You had better have a course of action on how you're going to recoup or make up for whatever it is that you did. So when I realized this, I spent literally 18-hour days for 5 days straight coming up with courses of action for my investors. And I laid all 3 out, very detailed. This is what we need to do. And at the end of it, they said, Edwin, we trust you. What is it you feel that we should do? And so I made the decision. We went through that course of action. And at the end of the day, you know, we didn't recover anything. We lost everything. And that was a very tough pill to swallow. Matter of fact, I don't think I would, at that moment, I would have rather have been back in Afghanistan in an ambush than sitting on the phone or on a Zoom call like this with my investors. It was
imagine.
tough.
Yeah, that sounds really tough. But what a fantastic story for people to hear, because I don't hear stories like this on a lot of podcasts.
Yeah. It's all about all the wins. So it's much better to hear a good loss.
Hey, I'm a very realistic guy, guys. Like, you're going to buy some bad deals. You're going to lose money. If you can't handle that, you probably should not be getting invested in real estate. Like, if you can't handle that, then this is not the path for you. You should probably try a different path.
Right. Yeah. No, it's
Opening up
great
for
to
that.
hear. It's great to hear the authentic, real picture from someone who's been there. So that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so we want to transition to something we like to ask all our guests. We wouldn't be tech guys who invest if we didn't ask you some tech question.
Was this on the questions? Wait a second.
Oh yeah. So I don't know if you're able to answer this one, but if you are, we'd love to know like a favorite piece of tech you used when you were a Green Beret. Are you able to answer something like that?
No, I can't.
Okay.
Just
We
say
I got
that
a backup, man.
it was
Don't worry.
attached to a weapon system,
Oh,
and
okay.
it was pretty fantastic. So,
That's still cool. All right. So what was the favorite piece of tech you had when you were a kid? Like a video game or something like that when you were young.
so my favorite tech when I was a kid was a video camera. I recorded everything.
Cool.
I made my own movies. I had my buddies in my neighborhood. We would all come together and I would be the director, which is interesting because that's where I found myself today, right? I'm just directing.
Yeah.
But I would create my own movies and, I didn't have the editing software, but what little Microsoft editing software I had access to, I created my little videos, added music and transitions. And all my friends thought that, wow, we're going to be in Hollywood one day. That didn't work out.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Oh, that's fantastic. I like that the video, and that's what we're doing
Yeah.
now, right? We're leveraging
Right?
technology to connect each other. So with that in mind, where can people find you, Edwin?
So LinkedIn, I'm huge on LinkedIn. I believe in the platform. I believe in the power of LinkedIn. So I'm really big on LinkedIn. I think Facebook is more personal. You'll find me if you're plugged into some of the Facebook real estate investor groups. You may see me there, especially in the Florida market. I peruse some of the Facebook groups, but I have shifted a lot of that over to our loan originators. So they're out there, they're plugged in, they're doing the sales aspect, if you will. A lot of my day-to-day is really personal interactions with capital investors that want to invest in real estate, but again, they don't have the three keys. And so they recognize that what we bring to the table and they want to invest into my company. But LinkedIn is a great platform. That's one that I'm big on. So if somebody just goes to LinkedIn, they type in the search bar, Edwin D. Epperson III, you will find me. You'll see my big smiling face and connect with me. I'm all about some new connections. So connect with me and we'll go from there and see what we can do to help you out.
Awesome. Edwin, thanks so much. This has been fantastic. I think you've added a ton of value to our listeners, and we've really enjoyed having you on.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Adam and Kevin, for very much for having me on the show, for inviting me on. I think it's been incredible. It's great to always talk about this, to share my experiences, both good and bad. I think that's really important, is sharing the bad as well. Again, like you said, a lot of people are always hearing the upside, oh, this is great, it's all fairy tales and unicorns, and reality, it's a lot of mud and crap. So.
Yeah, that's
I love
great,
it.
man. Well, thanks again.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you very much for having me on.